Welcome everybody. How are ya? It's me, Sean Butler and Bugsy Malone on this Thursday, episode 154 of Tottenham Walks. Hope you're all happy, healthy, doing the things that you love with the people that you love doing them with. Please do me a favour, guys, if you wouldn't mind. Hit the like button on the video, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, hit the notification bell if you'd like to stay abreast of all the latest content, and of course drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topic or topics, because we're going to go through three of them right now. 1, 2, 3. One of them's injury news, one of them is transfer news, and one of them is about competitiveness in European football. Let's start with the European Super League. It's been announced today that it's back, or at least it's trying to be back in a new format. It never really went away. The original 6 English teams broke away from the initial version of it that had a lack of competitiveness, because there was guaranteed positions every single year, a way for those teams to make fortunes and cut everybody else out. And thanks to fan action, fan reaction, the negative press that surrounded it meant that the English teams pulled away. The European teams, many of them stayed in the background trying to figure out how to make it happen, because European football is bankrupt, guys. It's bankrupt, and this format is a way, this new version of it is a way for teams to try and stay competitive. So it's come back today. They've reached out to 50 European teams who are all on board with it on some level or another, and it could expand up to 80 teams based on meritocracy. There is no guaranteed positions for any particular team, but of course, to at least start off, you're going to have, based on probably some kind of coefficient point system, you're going to have the top 50 or 60 teams that will be put into, from what I understand, I could be wrong about this, but almost like a league system, a championship, a premiership, a Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, etc. And they'll be guaranteed 14 games a season, which would mean, if it was a traditional system, at least 8 teams per league. So you play the other 7 teams twice. But it might be bigger than that, and it could be more like an American football system where, you know, some teams don't play other teams, or some teams play other teams twice, and then a different set of teams only once, depending on who you are and what section of the division system you're in. All that's to come. We don't really know the format yet. What we do know is that they are trying to make it based on financial sustainability rules. They do want to have things like spending caps put in place based on promoting this idea of only being able to spend money that your club generates, not through external sponsorship mechanisms or through cash injections, which is obviously very pertinent to the topic of conversation we've been having over the last couple of days regarding Manchester City and probably Chelsea. We said in yesterday's video, is the financial sustainability rules, is that noose tightening around some of the clubs that have been, you know, living beyond their means? Are Manchester City and Juventus the first in a series of clubs that will be investigated and maybe hung out to dry through their greed or through the mechanisms in place that they have utilised to circumvent various rules? Well, we don't know yet, but you'd make the assumption that maybe Chelsea could be investigated for similar things. Certainly Paris Saint-Germain should probably have a microscope used to examine and audit their books. What about Real Madrid and Barcelona? How have they been funded over the years from their various governments? Are there teams elsewhere that we don't know about yet that are doing similar things in Germany or Holland? Not really sure. Those leagues tend to have more fan-owned kind of corporate systems, so probably a bit more difficult when you decentralise ownership and decision-making to hide the sources of money and get up to no good. But I did mention that maybe all of this in yesterday's video was a precursor to a European Super League re-emerging, and that this is a way that the Premier League and the UEFA and FIFA competitions can try and have a stranglehold over the competition, and they're worried about the dilution of their power from the Super League re-emerging and the money that could be generated through whoever is backing that, whether it's the banks, investment banks, or whether it would be some kind of mixture of investment vehicles and foreign direct ownership. All that stuff will be, I'm sure, will become clear, I'm sure, in the coming days and weeks. But ultimately, to me, if you are going to have certain rules in this new competition, if it's allowed to go ahead, and right now we don't know, I think there is some arbitration happening within the European courts around competitiveness and whether it's okay for FIFA and UEFA to have these kind of strangleholds over the footballing world. Is it legal to refuse clubs to participate in new systems, new competitions? Again, we don't know. But any rules around financial sustainability has to be consistent, surely, between, say, the Premier League, the Serie A and the Champions League, and at the same time this Super League. Otherwise, where do you draw the line? If one club is in breach in one format but they're okay in another, how's that going to work? It's very complex and complicated, and I'm not entirely sure that those answers have been released yet. If I see them, if they are, I'll certainly update. What are your thoughts though on this? Do you want to see Tottenham play, the same team twice in the Super League, maybe get them again in the Champions League? How are you going to fit in another 14 games into the Premier League season? Can the football teams, can the players really handle playing another 14 highly competitive games in a season? Is it going to be treated almost like the Nations League of international football, like a necessary evil to make money for the competition owners, but ultimately it's just an unnecessary and irrelevant distraction, but that ultimately just drains the resources in terms of energy of the players that you have? And what about the resources of the fans? If all of this stuff is to try and level the playing field between European clubs and the Premier League, because most of the other teams out there, the European giants of the last 50 years, are essentially bankrupt. The Premier League has more money flowing into it than ever before, and will continue to have more money flowing into it than ever before. You can understand the drive for more revenue generation from those clubs out there in Europe. But ultimately, where's the money going to come from? It's going to come from you and me and Bugsy. Maybe not Bugsy, but that's where it's going to come from. That's where the money always ends up coming from. How are they going to do it? Are they going to charge 30 quid a month for your Sky Sports subscription to watch half the Premier League games, 30 quid a month for your BT Sports to watch the other half, which I think is an absolute disgrace anyway? And then are they now going to put that together on some Netflix for sport, Netflix for live sport, a new system where, pay-per-view, pay-per-event? Is the whole future of watching live sport, your football team, going to change? And if it does, how does that look? But ultimately, one thing's for sure, is that you and I will end up paying more money than we currently do to watch Shush Baba, to watch our team play. For me, it was a disgrace when Sky Sports were found in a court that they had to sacrifice some of the games that they previously controlled the entire televised viewing systems for, in order to be less of a monopoly in the live sports streaming world, but only for them to keep their prices where they are, but offer you half the service, and then you have to pay essentially twice now to get what you could have got before under a monopoly. It didn't make sense. Well, it did make sense if you're a cynic like I am, but the idea that it was doing a disservice to sports fans was quickly unwound when you found out how much more you were paying for getting exactly the same thing as you got before. The same thing will happen here. We'll end up paying more. We'll have to stream from somewhere else for these games if it's allowed to go ahead. What are your thoughts on the whole concept? Are you interested? Are you intrigued? Is it a necessary evil? Is it the only way that the European leagues can compete going forward with the likes of City, Chelsea, Manchester United, Newcastle? Not sure. Certainly one to keep talking about. Whilst we're talking about giants from Europe, I'll move on to the second topic of the conversation, guys, and that is Alessandro Bastoni, the long talked about left-sided centre-back of Inter Milan. Maybe not coming to Tottenham, a target we've been looking at for well over a year, It looks as though there's contract talks that are happening, but there's very high levels of frustration with regards some incompatibilities with what Bastoni wants versus what he's being offered. And of course, Inter Milan, fresh off the experience of essentially losing Milan Skriniar for free to PSG. It hasn't happened yet, but it will in the summer. Inter Milan, who are broke, they had a $0, €0 transfer budget in January, are probably going to have to accept the fate that if they can't offer Bastoni what he wants, they'll probably have to sell him in the summer. Otherwise, they'll lose him for free in the next year, because that's when his contract is out. Did Tottenham strike on this one? Is this why we signed Longley? We knew this was potentially a scenario that would play out. Is it a bit of genius to have waited out for Bastoni? Is he the player that you want? I don't watch Italian football live. I have kept an eye on him through Y-Scout, and I look at the specifics of his game. I think he's a very talented game, but from what I've seen and what I've heard, his season hasn't been mind-blowing. I think he started off pretty poor. I think he might have even got dropped after an injury for a few games, but then he's come back in, upped his level, and is now, a commanding presence at the back of the Inter Milan defence. But is this part of the overall plan for Tottenham? Has Conte and Paratici had those conversations with Bastoni? Is that the problem? Is that why Bastoni hasn't signed a new contract? Because he knows he can double his money at Tottenham and Inter Milan can't compete? If that is the case, are Tottenham the only likely team in the Premier League that will be in for him? I don't think so. You can make the argument that Newcastle might want to double down on their strong defence. Manchester United, if they have all the bundles of money in the world under a Qatari ownership, are they going to go after him? He's young, he's touted as being one of the future all-stars of Italian defensive football. What about Chelsea? Are they happy now with the defenders they've got? Anybody else? Arsenal, do they need someone to go alongside Saliba or Gabriel? I don't know. I think Tottenham can make a decent claim for his signature if Conte was to hang around. And maybe him hanging around is dependent on signing someone like Bastoni. He would for sure improve us immensely overnight. And if you could figure that out, if you can think forward for 6 months and imagine a starting 11 next season that had Udogie on the left, Porro on the right, Romero and Bastoni on the left and right of a centre-back spot, and then, even if you had Eric Dyer in the middle of that back three, it's still a tantalising prospect to have those two on the left and right, Udogie and Porro, plus all the other options that we might be looking forward to up front. You could see how Tottenham's season next season could shape up, and all you'd really need to add to that mix after you get those two centre-backs is potentially just a goalkeeper. And for sure, guys, the last topic of today is about just that very topic. Hugo Lloris, unfortunately, went down late in the Manchester City game, apparently. I don't remember the tackle, but allegedly in the late stages of the game, he was involved in a challenge and he's hurt his ligaments in his ankle, and he'll be out for 6 to 8 weeks, taking us through, in worst case scenario, to April. A lot of major games we're going to be without Hugo Lloris. Up steps Fraser Forster, and then his deputy, his benchmate, will now have to be Brandon Austin or Alfie Whiteman. Both of those you're probably terrified about if something was to happen to Fraser Forster. If he was to have an injury or was to get sent off in a clumsy, rash challenge and was gone missing for 3 games, can Tottenham's season survive with Brandon Austin or Alfie Whiteman in goal? Probably not, which is why there is some speculation out there that Tottenham may turn their attentions to Ben Foster, the ex-footballer that retired in the summer and is now a YouTuber that he might go back to Tottenham on a short-term contract just in case something was to happen. Now, to be honest, to me, I'm actually okay with it. There's very few, other options available that are free transfers that you could go to right now. So in a world where you have to have either Ben Foster in goal or Alfie Whiteman or Brandon Austin, I would probably rather have Ben Foster, like needs must, and it's panic time. But in any event, let's hope that Fraser Foster can step up, level up, do the job that so many Tottenham fans were calling for during the last couple of months. Myself included, after seeing so many unnecessary errors from Hugo Lloris, I was one of the thousands of people that was saying, you need to drop him. You absolutely need to drop him. He's too much of a liability, and give Fraser Foster a chance, because when he's come in, he hasn't done a bad job. He's not necessarily going to be as good as a goalkeeper in terms of reflex saves. I don't think there's many goalkeepers in the Premier League that are as good as Hugo Lloris when he has absolutely zero time to think about it and it's all based on instinct. He's a brilliant, brilliant goalkeeper. The problem with Hugo Lloris is that as he's gotten older, some of those reflexes are a little bit slower than they used to be, which is natural. That's par for the course. But on top of that is the observation, I think, from most other managers that if you press the goalkeeper, if you press Hugo Lloris, when under pressure, Hugo Lloris has the propensity to lose his mind a little bit and panic. We've seen it against West Ham United, we've seen it against Manchester United, we've seen it against Arsenal. How many goals have been given away because of Hugo Lloris's inability to keep calm under pressure? And most of the teams that have taken points off of us of late have taken points in no small part because of goals that started with Hugo Lloris panicking. And so there was a legit justified call for him to be replaced by Foster. The only problem is that people that were asking for that, I guess, were asking for Foster to be in goal, but if something went wrong, you could still have Hugo Lloris come back in. More of an experiment rather than a forcing of the hand. But listen, be careful what you wish for, I guess. I'm okay with it, though. I think that Fraser Foster is a giant of a goalkeeper. He's got bags and bags of experience. He's a Premier League level goalkeeper. Pretty sure he's been an international goalkeeper as well. Pretty sure he's even played in Europe as well. So to me, I don't necessarily think it's as bad or as scary as it could have been or would have been if you had a typical second choice goalkeeper in a typical team. There's very few teams in the Premier League where the difference between your starter and your reserve goalkeeper is negligible. Most teams have a significant drop-off between their first choice and their number 13. And so, if it's going to happen, I'm glad we've got him in place rather than Galini or Joe Hart. And over to Fraser Foster. Let's see what you can do, mate. Maybe you can, do such a great job, take this opportunity that you can command the role and keep it going even after Hugo Lloris comes back from injury. But certainly, for sure now, we know that at the very first opportunity in the summer, we have to absolutely prioritise signing a goalkeeper. For those people in the fan base that are using this injury again as a stick to beat Daniel Levy with for saying we should have signed a goalkeeper in January, I don't think that was ever going to happen. I don't think it was ever a likely scenario. It wasn't a priority. What we got was minimal enough. Before we got a goalkeeper, we should have got a centre back. So, I don't think it's that fair to be criticising and challenging those decisions right now. But let's just see how we do. I'm going to leave it there, guys. Let me know your thoughts on Hugo and Fraser. How did you feel? Were you someone who was calling for Fraser Foster to be dropped? If so, are you not happy, but are you confident that he'll do okay? Let me know your thoughts about Bastoni. Do you still want him? Do you think he's going to be the guy? Is that the reason why his contract talks are stalling? Is it almost a kind of unspoken thought process here that maybe he's already decided to join us and Conte in the summer? How exciting would that be? And let me know your thoughts on the Super League. Are you excited by it? Do you think it's necessary? Will you pay for it if you have to pay more money on some third-party platform? Let me know your thoughts, guys. Like, share and subscribe. And as always, bye-bye.